What's up, YouTube Gen X? Okay. One of my favorite conversations to discuss is the whole wage gap between men and women, because oftentimes people take the conversation to 1950 and want to act as if we're living in a world where everybody expects women to simply be barefoot and pregnant, making peach cobbler every day. And no one really wants to take a look at where we are now. No one is saying that it's equal. I'm not saying by any means that it's equal between men and women in terms of pay, but nobody wants to look at where we are now. People want to run to 1950 or whatnot. And people don't want to factor in how this information is being uncovered. People aren't taking into account the various industries where your pay may not be a function of negotiation, but more so, hey, these are your qualifications, and this is the amount of experience you have, so we're going to base your pay off of that, like in education, where it's not so much about any sort of negotiation, right? It doesn't matter your gender. You're going to make X amount of dollars based off of the number of years you've been teaching and your level of education. That never gets factored in. Also, people don't talk about how they uncover this information, considering that a lot of industries and companies like to keep that a secret. They don't want employees, even with each other, discussing how much they're making, especially with an outsider here and there. So how are people getting this information? But with that being said, I'm not fighting the whole concept that men may be making more. Also, what kills me is when the women don't want to factor in the cons that go along with making more money in terms of the added responsibility. The fact that, you don't fall into that 9 to 5. When you're up there, it's like a 24/7 sort of job. My uncle's a partner at the firm he works for, and it's not one of those 9 to 5. It's 24/7. How many women want to deal with the fact that they may be having a nice family dinner during Christmas time, but they get a call to come into the office, they have to handle some shit. You know what I mean? How many women want all that? See, it's great when you talk about the increase in pay and, the corner office and your own parking lot or whatnot, but when it comes down to all the extra responsibilities and all the cons, how many women want that? So how many women elect to take that position? How many women decide, let me stay making my money right now, I'm not making great money, but it's good, I don't have the added responsibilities, I can work my 9 to 5 and go home. I'll let my husband have to worry about all that. How many women opt to do all that because it's easier? And I'm not even faulting women for doing that, and I understand the rationale behind it. I just don't like when the women act like that's not a factor when we talk about, the pay gap and who makes more and who gets this position versus who gets that position. But another thing that kills me is the whole concept of a double standard that the women can control that they don't. And the fact that they don't want to control this double standard also hurts them when it comes to them not getting those high-paying positions or them not moving up. Now, think about it. When you're a head honcho at your job, okay, you're up there, you're usually going to be a choice maker, right? You're going to be a decision maker. And with that being said, you have to be in a position to where you are always rational, because you have to do what's best for the company. They can ill afford for you to have a emotional letdown, whether it's something work-related or personal. Some sort of personal issue. He's going through a tough time with his family, his wife is tripping, or his daughter is singing out the house. They're expecting you to still come to work and be rational and how you make choices, because a lot of people are riding on the fact that you know what you're doing. Now you're dealing with, problems that may cost you millions of dollars, or problems that may enable you to get more money. You know what I mean? Like people want to make sure that the captain of that ship is somebody that's stable, and they're not going to be prone to falling off because they made some sort of, they let emotions trump their ration, right? I think we can all agree on that. Not even had this conversation before where I've heard women say that they prefer male leadership because men are supposed to be rational. Truth be told, a lot of women prefer to see men in power because they know, hey, we're not going to have any sort of emotional letdown. But once again, women will never say that. Women will never stand up and say, we prefer leadership out of men. I mean, think about it. People talk about, will we ever have a female president? Well, I mean, how many women do we have in America? I'm sure if women were simply on something like we want to see a woman and we don't have a problem with seeing women in power, they can make that happen. To be honest with you, if you really sit down and think about it, it should be easier to see a female president than there is to see a black president. Because even if every black person voted for the black candidate, does that mean he's going to win? No. But if the vast majority of women in America said we want to vote for a female president, that can happen easily. But why hasn't it happened? Well, because most women prefer to see male leadership. Now, you have your women that come through and, like I said, hold on to that double standard of women being, it's okay for women to be more emotional than men because they know they can get away with a whole lot more. They know they can make rational choices to do wrong or to act out of pocket, and they know they can write it off as some sort of emotional reaction, and women will buy it and men will buy it. So they're okay with it. Women across the board are okay with that double standard. I really haven't heard too many women fight the whole concept that women are more emotional than rational. For me, I do agree that men are more rational, but that does not mean that as a woman you are more emotional than rational. Right? You may be more emotional compared to men, but your ration is still there. Right? So I do expect women to operate in a certain way and not to succumb to emotion. That's just me personally. Now, like I said, everybody has their moments, but I think it's almost like the race car, where black people have destroyed the race car to the point where nobody wants to accept it, where we've used it and we weren't really being truthful with how we were using it. And that's how I feel with the sort of emotional part. Not to say that women, are emotional and that they're more prone to make a emotional choice over a rational one, but it's been played out. Like I said, you got women that not only do wrong, but run to emotions because they know everybody's going to buy it. So for me, I'll put it in the same category as the race car. It's been played out. It's been played out. The people that have been using it have not been using it wisely, so they've caused it to lose credibility. They can't blame anybody else. Black people can't blame anybody else for losing the race car. We used it poorly, so now no one's going to buy it. It worked back in the day. And I feel the same way about women in the sort of emotional response card. I don't buy it. I really don't buy it. But anyways, like I said, you have the women that hold on to it because they know that it gives them that free pass to do whatever. They can write it off. Well, my father wasn't there to show me love, or whatever. Somebody called me this when I was in the 8th grade, so because of that, now I do X, Y, and Z, right? But think about where it comes back to bite you in the ass. Think about that. So most women are okay with that because it gives them the free pass, but then what happens when they want those sort of positions where you're making more money? Right? When they want to move up and they want to be in positions of leadership. What happens then? Well, why should we elect to have you be our leader or be part of the, leadership when you've already agreed with the fact that women are more emotional than logical or rational, right? And that women are more prone to have their emotion trump their logic. With that being said, why would I want you to be in a position of leadership? Because shit will happen, whether we like it or not. The second you have a family, you're going to have issues that will come up that you just can't put away in a box. Or some other personal shit may happen to you. Who knows? So we're supposed to sit back and cross our fingers and hope that nothing ever happens because Rebecca's going to make an emotional choice? No, we're not going to deal with all that. Like I said, with men, we know that, hey, Even if a man's going through hell, he's supposed to be rational, and if not, he's supposed to resign. We expect you to resign, right? But most men don't want to lose all that, so they know I gotta be strong. Got to be strong. I got to make sure that I'm always acting calm, cool, and collected. But for women, right, you said that you don't have that ability, but yet you complain about why you don't get those positions and why you're not considered as a possible candidate for the position, right, or the added responsibilities and therefore the increase in the pay. It's like, well, you played your part in that. Because you guys held on to that sort of double standard because it worked in your favor. Who would want that? Like I said before, even the other female employees, I can guarantee you, if you took some sort of like secret poll and you interviewed them secretly, they would say, you know, if you ask them, who do you want to see in leadership? Do you want to see Hank or Rebecca? Right? You know, they may say out in the open, oh, we think that Rebecca can do just as good as the job, but behind closed doors, they feel more comfortable with Hank in a position of leadership. Right? It is what it is. Because they know that, well, you know, Hank's a man and he's supposed to act in a certain way. He's supposed to always put up the strong face and be logical and be rational and put emotions to the side. But Rebecca, who knows? Maybe her husband, isn't treating her right, and that she comes in and, she's not being as fair as she needs to be. You see it happen. I'm not trying to hate on women, but, I work within education, and I've been working in education since I was in college, doing various jobs. And for the most part, all the leadership and management and upper management, they've been women. I hate to say it, but they've been women. So I've actually dealt with women that were in position of leadership, and they suck for the most part. Some have been great, right? But for the vast majority, they've been whacked because they always let their emotions get in the way of what they have to do. And you can see it. And I say that because I've had other female employees that I work with complain. They did more complaining than I did. In terms of her having too much attitude or her going back on what she's been saying or whatnot, and it's like, at least y'all see it. It's not just the men coming through and complaining, because when we complain, we're complaining just because it's a female. Oh, we just don't like the fact that we have to take orders from a woman, but it's not even about that. She can't come through professionally. Just be professional. We don't need you to be nice. We don't need you to be a prick. Be professional. Right? But I've seen so many women who couldn't handle the stress of the job. They wanted a higher position. They wanted the increase in pay. They couldn't handle the added responsibility and the fact that, people are going to come after you for accountability, as well as balance the normal shit that happens as you're older and you have a family and you have, a husband and kids. I saw them cold where they couldn't help but infuse their emotions with their job. And it makes people upset. I've left jobs because of that. Right? And I've had, employees try to petition and put shit together, and they were female-led. Because they didn't like what was going on. And once again, quite frankly, a lot of them would rather see, a male empowered. One job in particular, we had the ability to transfer to different sites, and a lot of people wanted to transfer to different sites, and the sites that the people wanted to transfer to were the sites that were pretty much managed by men, because they liked the way the men conducted themselves and handled themselves, and how they were just more professional and not so much emotional. And once again, these were women. It wasn't the men that were saying, we want out of here, we want to go to Site D because Site D is where the guys are at. No. So, you sit back and kind of like, you really get annoyed with the sort of pay gap, or, who gets this position and who doesn't get the position. It really annoys me. Because oftentimes, you'll have women that don't want to really move up the corporate ladder and hold those positions once again because it's more responsibility. They just want to be paid more for what they do. Right, which is a big difference. I think men, when we want more money, we're not going to sit there and say, you need to pay us more money. We're going to figure out how to move up. How do I move up? I can only go so far. And that's where logic comes into play. It doesn't matter how good I am, but it is what it is. If I want more money, I have to consider changing my position and moving up the corporate ladder. But for a lot of women, I think it's more so I want to do the same job. I want to get paid more. I want the power and prestige of this sort of position, but I don't want the responsibilities. I want to stay in my safe, cushiony desk job where I'm answering the phone. I just want to get more money for it. It's not going to happen that way. So, it really gets ugly because you'll have, and this is what kills me, you'll have the few women that do get to come on, your women that don't fit into the sort of mode that most women are in, and they'll try to lobby on behalf of women, but they'll throw out the fact that most women don't think like you. So yeah, you can do the job, and I'm sure that if you had that sort of position of leadership, you would be okay. But to sit back and lobby for women across the board, it's not going to happen that way. Because we both know that with more money comes more responsibility, and how many women are in a position to handle it, right? Even the few women that I do know that are going above and beyond, so they will be those women in terms of the women that have those sort of high-paying positions where it's high power and authority. These women are not like the vast majority of women. They're not, and they know it themselves. But, these same women will then turn around and try to act as if they're trying to lobby and advocate for women across the board, which is crazy to me. Because you have a lot of women that elect to move up or to not want to, move up the corporate ladder because of all the cons that come into play. But that never gets accounted for. Every woman is fit to be a leader and they want to be leaders or whatnot, but it's men that are just holding back and saying, no, we don't want you here. Bullshit. Like I said before, women were so progressive and women were true believers in that, women can be just as good as a leader as a man can be. We would have already had a female president a long time ago. Already. You factor in all the men that can't vote because they have some sort of criminal record, right? You factor in the amount of women that we have and, the fact that you have men that go off and die, the people who are getting killed in the streets of men. Like, you look at the advantage that women have just from a voting standpoint. And it's kind of like, if you guys really felt like female leadership can be just as good as male leadership, how come you guys just can't band together and say we want to vote for a female president? It's not going to happen. That's my vid. Y'all take it easy. God bless.